Tell me about that first rush of fame, because there was recognition with that first record, and all of a sudden, the thing that you've been dreaming about and, this lusted after, you have it. I mean, what does that feel like when all of a sudden you're on those TV shows and people buy this record?
I don't know, it was weird because I sort of, in one way, I sort of felt that it was kind of like manifest destiny, because
well, it just didn't happen.
Well, you have to do this, you have to manifest your own destiny. Sometimes it works, and like I graduated from Goldsmiths, and then I went on the dole for 2.5 years. I did drama, and I used my acting skills on this very sympathetic lady at the job centre, and exactly, yeah. So I managed to I promised myself I wouldn't get a job until I got a record deal. Somehow that sort of blind faith was enabled me to manifest that destiny. So when it happens, you go, it's like, oh, this is the phase that I've been waiting for.
This is what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
But that's very different when you get there.
It was, of course, it was really exciting. I remember being in a taxi driving into Soho and hearing our single on the radio for the first time. 36 Degrees, and Steve Lamont played it, and that was pretty cool. But like everything, it's sort of fantastical. You kind of get used to it after a while. But we were extremely mischievous, and we wanted to go on top of the pops and dresses just because we could. We wanted to see what we could get away with. We were, we wanted to wear more makeup than the next guy. It's just in our nature at the time. There was this bravado about us. Let's just see how far we can push it. Going on top of the pops. Looking the way that we did was let's just see how far we can push it. Really.
It almost seemed like there was an intentional. All bands have image. I think anyone that's in the public band has an image, but there was a visual agenda, I guess.
Totally, and the agenda itself was political, really. In terms of what we were trying to do through our image to question the non-fluidity of genders and representation in the media and sexuality and these things. We wanted essentially, and it worked. We wanted people to think, homophobic teenagers or young men to think that I was a girl and to fancy me, and then find out that I wasn't, and then have to ask themselves a question. So it was very much politically motivated at the time. Yeah.
Sex has always found its way into your lips, especially.
Yeah, mine and every decent band since Little Richard. Good golly, Miss Molly, she loves to ball.
Is that something?
It's a driving force of rock and roll, I think. Elvis the Pelvis.
But lots of music around you at the time, at the time of kind of Nazi boy and stuff like that, wasn't overtly sexual in the same way. It wasn't questioning sexuality at all. But it was very much conforming to lads, boys and girls.
Yeah.
And
it was also quite obsessed with its own history, its own sort of nationalistic history. Bands like Blur have gone on to become quite avant-garde in the choices that they've made musically. At the time, were very reverential towards a period of musical history, of British musical history of the mid-60s kind of thing. And we were just raised on no wave, on post-punk, on that kind of stuff, on American music, and Depeche Mode, that kind of stuff. So it's just a different one, So that's what sort of fed into what we were doing, And there's always an ambiguity about those bands, and the Pixies to me just seemed like they were, as much as David Bowie appeared to be being down from outer space. The Pixies were just so awful. They were fascinating. These really enormous guys singing with a really high pitched voice. bass player calling herself Mrs. John Murphy, singing about Bible stories about being molested by priests.
Sometimes in Spanish.
Yeah, sometimes in Spanish. Yeah. So I mean, this was otherworldly to me, and that was the attraction.
We just mentioned Nancy Boyler, one of the key kind of songs in your career. What's your relationship like with that track now? Because often some artists have their kind of key songs and they don't get on too well with them, they don't actually like playing them live, or their relationship with the song is, sometimes a millstone, sometimes they celebrate it. What's your relationship like with that track? Because you don't always play it live.
Yeah, I've had an on and off relationship with that song for the past 15 years. I mean, obviously it's the one that sort of was a great deal of attention very early on in our career. It's kickstarted a hell of a lot of things, But then at a certain time, I felt that it became too identifiable, too much of an identity thing for us, and that and that was just too defining, So we stopped playing it. I wouldn't go so far as to say, and then we started playing it again, and then we stopped playing it, and I think we're going to play it again soon. But it's not what I consider to be our creed, like Radiohead, kind of thing. That is the one that I refuse to play, which is Pure Warning. I just think it's really stupid. Just musically it's quite good, but the lyrics are shit. And I can do so much better. So I just can't sing it.
But is it up to you to decide that?
Yes, absolutely. It's up to me. I wrote the motherfucker, and it's totally up to me. I want to have a truthful connection with an audience, and I can't do that whilst going through the motions. So we are. Yes, people have often described us as a careerist band, but we're the careerist band that hardly ever plays its two biggest chart hits live, often to the chagrin of the audience. But it's for the sake of, a truthful experience. You can't put yourself into something that, song-wise, that you can't connect with people if you're trying to connect with something which isn't truthful,
It's still, I guess on the one hand, it's very difficult to do that, to go in front of a audience of people and go, I'm going to do this, so I'm going to play it. And that's going to be quite tough. But I guess also maybe it sort of spurs you on to go, everything else you can hear is going to be fucking bad.
Exactly. So, we all live with each other, much better. Get over it. Get into this, You said you've got a dysfunctional relationship with your songs. I think you said that.
Yeah.
About 25
minutes ago, before we came here. What do you mean by that? It's interesting sentence.
Well, I mean, at different times in our careers, it becomes it's always been very difficult for us to scrape together enough songs to play an hour and a half set. Yeah, because having a connection ourselves to them, for them meaning something to us, is really, really important. If we go on stage purely to make other people happy, we do want to make people happy, but if we make ourselves miserable in the process, it's a job. It's working in an office. So, and it changes. I mean, familiarity does breed contempt in terms of, with certain songs. So, like, after a while, you just have to let certain things lie for a bit. And then you can bring them back. There are just some songs that just are so clumsy that they just have never really worked live. You just